Vuoi anche questo?
Magari me lo lasci lì. O quando si fa le domande.
Tu vieni a parlare qua o parli dal tuo?
Sì, io parlo.
Ok, va bene.
Hello? Hello? Mi sentite?
Yeah.
Can you hear it? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, once everyone gets settled, we're going to start. You can't hear? Yeah, I didn't think so. Oh, here we go. I'm live. It was better when you couldn't hear me, probably. Okay, we're going to get started and then we'll let a few more on the wait list come by. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Ciao. Look at this. What a lineup. Oh, my God. I'm so excited. Ciao, Monica. Okay, then she'll explain why she's on the screen later. I'll leave it for her. Okay, so welcome to the iconic woman in Italian wine. Let me get the first slide. Not that one, the one after that. Okay, so look at that while I'm skiing. I know the men cannot look and listen at the same time, but I think the woman can, right? So let's try that. So this is the iconic woman in Italian wine. Just make sure you're in the right room. My name is Stevie Kim. I have the greatest pleasure, and you have no idea that what we are able to gather here today for several reasons. The most important for this absolutely unprecedented meeting of the mind with Monica, Lana, that you see, and Alison Napjus, both well-established veterans in the wine world. So let's give it up for Monica and Alison. So just in case you don't know who Alison is, Alison joined Wine Spectator in 2000 and was promoted to senior editor in 2012, and now is also the tasting director since 2016. She is the lead taster for wines of Spain, France, Champagne, Alsace regions, South Africa, and luckily also Italy. So all of Italy, except of course, Bruce takes care of Piemonte and Tuscany for now, at least. Then Monica Lana. She has written for La Pubblica. She's a little bit more Italian, from Rome, Business Week, International Herald Tribune. And since 2003, she had joined Wine Enthusiast as Italy-based correspondent. And now her current role, which is 2013, she is the lead reviewer for Italy for Robert Parker Wine Advocate. Monica Lana for Robert Parker Wine Advocate and Alison Napjus for wine spectator. It's kind of like, it takes me a little bit to say all that in one breath, right? Of course, they're natural rivals for readership and prestige, have crossed all the historic boundaries between their publications in order to show the wine world the power of women to unite. It's always been a long-standing dream for me. I've been working on this for 3 years, even before the pandemic, to unite the forces of these two leading wine critics and journalists to guide a tasting together. So yes, there will be obviously be a bit of wine tasting, yes. So you have the glasses in front of you. However, what I'm really interested in is in how they can facilitate the stories of these 7 iconic woman-led Italian wineries. So 7 iconic women, 7 signature wines, giving voice to the history and narrative that reveals the true soulfulness of Italian wine. We have spoken to Monica, Alison, we've spoken a lot about this on the Zoom prior to joining you today. Some of you have approached me and asked me, how did this happen? I think the more appropriate question, frankly, is how come this hadn't happened before? Why didn't this happen before, right? Why not? Competing wine writers have never hosted such events before. Wine writing has a lot to do with competition, as we all know, between magazines, between the writers themselves, and certainly among readership. Wine writing is based upon opinions and personal analysis, with the most technical, elegant, exacting, alluring tasting notes carrying a lot of weight and shaping careers in the sector. These two female wine critic titans are collaborating for the first time to create a once-in-a-lifetime event featuring 7 equally iconic producers from Italy. So in the beginning, I got that from Webster's dictionary. I Googled that. And because I think we discussed what we should call this. I was really keen on iconic women in Italian wine. And I was a little bit persistent. And so as you can see, even just the example, it mentions wine. So I said, this is destiny. It has to be about iconic women in Italian wine. So the lineup for the iconic women, Marilisa Allegrini of Amarone fame, Albira and Tanori, the Queen of Super Tuscan, Chiara Boschis, the only female Barolo boy, Elisabetta Foradori, one-woman pioneer from Trentino, Elena Fuchsia, genius of volcanic soils, Sheila Incisa della Rocchetta, heiress to legendary Sassicaia. And we're not finished. Ariana Okipinti, firebrand from Sicily. These women will each present their signature wine, telling their personal stories with the support and engagement, of course, of Monica and Alison. As with the journalists, you know, the producers, I love the Italians, but they're incredibly individualistic, talented. These producers have been competitors for many years, not just amongst themselves, but of course with everybody else, in some cases for many, many generations. They represent 5 different regions of Italy, and their ages span over 40 years. Their wines reach out for market share and prominence across global markets. And yet today, they come together to share their wines and their stories in the name and hope and camaraderie. Thank you, Alison and Monica, for joining me on this journey and for having accepted this challenge, as well as, of course, these iconic women in front of you today. So let's get started. And let's have some fun.
And I think Monica is going to speak to us first. Monica.
Thank you. Thank you, Alison. Thank you very much. I was hoping we would be seeing the end of virtual wine tastings and Zoom meetings, but here I am, unfortunately, with great regret and disappointment, joining you by video link from my hotel in Verona, just a few kilometers away from where you are seated today. I tested positive for COVID yesterday, but I'm extremely grateful to find out before setting foot inside the crazy and frenetic world of Italy, where I surely would meet so many dear friends and colleagues that I have not seen in 2 long years. I'm very sorry that I cannot be with you in person for this historic tasting. When Stevie proposed the idea of doing a seminar on the iconic women of Italian wine, Alison and I were immediately receptive and excited by the idea. What I personally found most compelling is that I would have the opportunity to present beautiful Italian wines with a colleague who works for a magazine that shares market space with my own. I don't believe the Wine Spectator and Robert Parker Wine Advocate have ever collaborated on anything. And with a certain amount of smug certainty, excuse me, I suspect that our male colleagues at these publications or other competing magazines would never pull resources together in this fashion. Can you imagine? This is what makes this masterclass different from anything that has ever been done in the past. Sorry. I want to underline how groundbreaking this collaboration is. There are so many important benefits to us working together. As I sit here in isolation in my hotel room and cough, sorry about that, I think about all the troubles and bad news that we have endured in recent times. It has been overwhelming and very scary, but no matter whom I speak with, one theme always emerges. We are all burning with a desire for new beginnings, new chapters, living and living together and enjoying being together. It doesn't take much to read between the lines. That's what this masterclass is really about. Inclusivity, camaraderie, working together, pulling resources for a common purpose, creating togetherness. The 7 women seated before you immediately agreed to participate in this seminar. They instantly recognized the spirit of this exercise, and they joined our efforts with matching enthusiasm and emotion. It is amazing how seamlessly and how effortlessly this seminar came together. Keeping in theme, we asked each participant to share a wine or a vintage that is important to them on a personal level. Maybe it represents a special achievement, or maybe it coincides with an important moment in the life of its creator. Hopefully, we'll have a chance to talk about some of those reasons when we explore the wines together. Alison and I believe that there is a profound soulfulness to Italian wine, and maybe, just maybe, that special spirit is what sets Italian wine apart from all the rest. Is it that what makes it special? That it's that makes Vino Italiano different and attractive to a growing population of young and savvy wine lovers. Let's find out together. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Stevie and Monica, for those wonderful introductions. Monica, I think you really told the heart and emotion behind this masterclass, and I'm very pleased to be presenting here with everybody, Monica, Stevie, and all the wonderful wine producers. Now, I'd like to speak for a moment about the thoughts behind this, the cerebral part of the experience. The title is Iconic Women in Italian Wine, but we're in 2022, The idea of female contribution to the wine industry, it's not new. Women are everywhere, and it takes both men and women to make the Italian wine the great success that it is today. Even looking at these 7 panelists, there are many other exceptional women who could also be here today. But when we began talking about this panel, some names were immediately on the tip of the tongue. And we're very pleased to have you all here. Thank you for doing that. Many studies over the last several decades have suggested that women are better communicators. They use more words and more expressive words, that they have a greater ability to listen and to empathize. Our panelists are not specifically or exclusively communicators. They're winery leaders, winery founders, winemakers, and in our opinion, all around trailblazers. And so we wanted to have them here to tell their stories, but also to hear how they tell their stories. We especially felt it was time for this in light of the pandemic, when we all had to pivot to find new ways to connect and communicate and to continue the business of wine. Today, we're going to be focusing not only on these 7 great producers and their selected wines, but also 3 primary themes: territory, wine ambassadors, and legacy and family. And I think we're going to hear some really interesting insights along the way. To explain very quickly about the format, after Monica and I formally introduce each of our panelists, the tasting and presentation will be in 3 groups or flights. We'll taste 3 wines blind in the first group, and then 2 in the second and the third. And in between each, we're going to ask for the audience to participate by guessing which wine has been poured blind. You all have a list of the wines, but you're going to have to, do we all have a list of the wines? No, we don't. Okay, you're gonna have to just really get a guess here. But of course, you're all very great tasters, and I'm sure it'll be educated guesses. But then we will ask some questions kind of along the theme of each group and hear from the producers individually. They'll be answering not only our questions, but telling us why they selected the particular wine and sharing their stories. So I think we can kind of go right into our introductions, and Monica is going to introduce Elisabetta.
All right, so our first producer is the wonderful Elisabetta Foradori. The massive drama of the Italian Alps with its jagged peaks and snowy capped mountains meets a softer landscape with apple orchards and hillside vineyards in the region of Trentino. It is at this crazy intersection of vertical versus horizontal, Mediterranean versus continental, Italy versus Europe, that we find little pockets of creative thinking and out-of-the-box innovation. Elisabetta Foradori and her family create groundbreaking wines that push the boundaries and rewrite all the rules. Her winemaking philosophy has from the very beginning incorporated sustainability, biodiversity, biodynamics, and the use of alternative vessels like amphora. These qualities came naturally and fully organically to Elisabetta. Her logo is the pomegranate fruit, and there is a tree just by the heavy wooden doors that lead to her fermentation room at the winery. On a symbolic level, the pomegranate represents many little ideas, hundreds of tiny seeds packed together neatly into one beautiful container. That's exactly what we get with Elisabetta's wines.
Welcome, Elisabetta. Okay, and now I'd like to introduce Ariana Okipinti. My first trip to Sicily was about 10 years ago, and at the time, Ariana's wines already had quite a following in the US. I was really looking forward to meeting her. But first, I visited her uncle, Giusto Okipinti, at Kos Winery the day before seeing her. He told me a story about Ariana. As a teenager, this small young woman on a big tractor driving through her hometown wearing a cowboy hat, completely fearless. And that image has always stuck with me because I think it says a lot about Ariana and her path in the wine world. There's a little bit of kind of the Wild West in there, and she's an explorer and somebody who has a lot of drive and passion. After working with her uncle and going to enology school, she started out in 2004 making just one cask of wine, putting all of her dreams and all of her then very much shoestring budget into that first wine. Today, she makes 10 different bottlings, and along the way, Ariana has become a poster child, not only for Sicily's Renaissance, but also for natural wines as she explored non-interventionist winemaking, and a protagonist for production from native varieties, and of course, for young winemakers to chase their dreams, especially female winemakers. Thank you, Ariana, for being here today.
The next winemaker that we would like to introduce is Chiara Boschis. Barolo is a wine of great humanity, thanks to its legacy and long history that ties Italy to the great winemaking traditions of France and the rest of the world. It is known as the king of Italian wines, and for very good reason. At its heart is the Nebbiolo grape, this finicky, late ripening varietal that is both robust and delicate at the same time. It is generous, but yet it holds itself back to age over the long haul. It is a wine that offers immediate personality, but it is also fluid, ever shifting and changing over the course of its bottle evolution. On one of my first visits to Chiara Boschis in the little town of Barolo, I remember finding a little patch of daisies growing right outside her cellar door. I went inside with her and she gave me a tour past her old barrels and the ancient walls. I was struck by her passion. At the time, she told me about her efforts to lobby local producers to make sure that the entire Canubi crew in Barolo could become a fully organic vineyard. I always think of those daisies when I come back to visit Chiara Boschis now. I look for them in that little patch of grass. Her wines shine bright against the profound elegance, depth, austerity, and pedigree that is Barolo. She makes 3 expressions, one from Canubi in Barolo, one from the Mosconi crew in Monforte d'Alba, and she has a blended wine called Via Nuova that sees fruit from Barolo, from the Terlo and Liste vineyards, Monforte d'Alba from the Ravera and Mosconi vineyards, and Serralunga d'Alba from the Gabuti and Baudana vineyards. Thank you, and back to you, Alison.
Thank you, Monica. Now, yes. And next, I'd like to introduce Marilisa Allegrini. And as with Ariana, I have a mental picture of Marilisa that always stays with me. It's her dashing across the lawns of her family's Villa della Torre property, running towards a waiting helicopter that was ready to whisk her away to Tuscany. And not to make all of you think that she's a rock star, but well, yes, she is kind of a rock star. Although she is just as passionate and knowledgeable about the wine production as her winemaker brother, Franco, when her father passed away suddenly in the early 1980s, her path changed. Her role was to leave the winery behind and to travel the world communicating about Amarone and Allegrini. 20 years later, Marilisa saw the opportunity to expand, to explore new expressions of Italian terroir. She was the drive behind purchasing and renewing first Poggio al Tesoro in Bulgari, and shortly after San Polo in Montalcino. She's an incredible businesswoman and professional, a tireless ambassador for Italian wine, a fashionista, and a mentor for many. Welcome, Marilisa.
The next producer we'd like to introduce is Elena Fuchsia. I have a soft spot for Lucania, or Basilicata, as the region is more commonly known. I have danced pizzica and tarantella under a starry nights, eaten my fair share of dried red peppers called peperoni cruschi and little meat rolls called numarid at town fairs that celebrate local saints, some Christian, some outright pagan, with mind-bending twists that are unique to southern Italy. I have bought into the local superstitions, belief in spells, witches, and old traditions. Believe me, for a time in my life, I was deep into Basilicata. I will forever love Elena Fuccia's wines because they are so perfect, they so perfectly reflect the infinite charms and magic of her volcanic wine region. If a wine is meant to impart a sense of place, Elena's Aglianico transports me directly to the Vulture with all of its secrets and treasures waiting to be discovered. But Elena's overall contribution to Italian wine is far more important. She has energized an entire generation of winemakers in her region, many of them young women. She has inspired them to make great wines and build a robust wine appellation founded on quality and understanding of international markets. She has brought Basilicata to the world stage. Thank you.
And next, I'd like to introduce Albira and Tanori. I don't know exactly when I first met Albira, but I do remember that I was relatively new to covering Italian wines, so a bit younger, and certainly impressed to be meeting Albira and Tanori. And out of the whole world of Antinori wine and its nearly 24 estates, what did she want to discuss? Tenuta Montanisa, Antinori's property in Franciacorta. Albira knew of my love for champagne and sparkling wines, and she immediately found a way to connect with me over this passion while still communicating the Antinori story. And I think it's a fine example of the way Albira has navigated her leadership of one of Italy's wine giants, Antinori. She assumed her role as president in 2017, while her father, Marchese Piero Antinori, is still quite active. It is Albira and her sisters Allegra and Alessia who are out front today. Antinori is one of Italy's traditional pillars, but Albira has helped to modernize it in many ways, including directing the construction of Antinori's impressive new Chianti Classical cellar, which opened in 2013. And the scope of her work now goes well beyond Tuscany, Solaia, and Tignanello. The Antinori footprint explores terroir and grape varieties around the world, from Chile to California to Washington State in the United States, and in regions throughout Italy. And Albira seamlessly oversees it all. Welcome, Albira.
The next presentation is for Priscilla Incisa della Rocchetta. Priscilla is the first to tell you that she is part of a team. She is one component in a complicated mosaic that makes one of the greatest wines on earth. Her grandfather and her father before her, Niccolò Inciso della Rocchetta, would create a wine for friends, Sassicaia, with the first commercial vintage being 1968. The blend of Cabernet Sauvignon with a little bit of Cabernet Franc ushered in a new wave of wines that would completely change the dynamic and the future of Italian fine wine. All wine in Italy is born from Sassicaia in some way, one producer once told me, and I believe this to be true. Sassicaia has started a new chapter for Italy that brings Italian wine to the forefront of the great collectors and great wine list of the world. Tenuta San Guido is located in Bolgheri on the coast of Tuscany. In this special area that faces the Tyrrhenian Sea, light is reflected off the water surface and onto the mountains where the vineyards grow. Sassicaia is the ultimate Italian legend and icon. Thank you.
Okay, so now we know who's here, in case you didn't before. And you can see that we have 3 wines poured. This is our first group. So everybody please taste them now and think about who you think, which wine might belong to which producer. I am going to give you a little bit of a hint and tell you who's in each grouping. Well, actually, taste first and then we'll get to that. Yeah, and we actually managed to deliver some small samples to Monica. So I don't know if while we're tasting, Monica, if you have any notes. Some very distinctive wines here, I would say. Right away, what I love about Italy, wines that really speak and say something to you out of the glass. Monica, any comments?
Yes, absolutely. Thankfully, despite my terrible voice and the coughing, I do have a sense of smell and taste. So I'm very excited to taste these wines. Off the bat, we jump into the first sample, which is obviously a white wine. But I think you'll notice that it's kind of hard to tell exactly what grape this could be. There's a kind of a fullness. There's a lot of kind of a ripe apple, pear, a little bit of nuttiness. But yet...
I was going to say, Monica, I think if this was truly blind and we were tasting in the dark or with black glasses, you wouldn't know if this is a white wine or a red wine.
Exactly, because it's very generous. It's incredibly generous, very perfumed, and a lot of depth. But I'm really struck by the kind of creaminess as well.
And also to talk about wine number 2. This to me, this beautiful juiciness, beautiful expression. And I actually think we're going to see this in all of these wines, just the wonderful complexity that we're going to find. Monica, I'll let you maybe move on to wine number 3.
Yes, so wine number 3 is definitely, there is a bit of evolution there. But I mean, notice how those kind of earthy notes jump right at you. There's licorice, there's dark tar, there's kind of like a rusty nail. There's also a kind of almost a little bit of a balsamic note that kind of comes straight from the bouquet, with a little bit of almost like a dried violet or even a little bit of rosemary.
Great mineral expression. Yeah, we're going to let them do some tasting notes too, but we're actually going to jump to the part where we have some audience participation, please. So I am going to give you a little bit of a hint here, if you haven't already figured out. Our first group includes a wine from Elisabetta Foradori, also from Ariana Okipinti, and also from Chiara Boschi's. So who do you think our white wine belongs to? Raise your hand if you think, how am I doing this actually? Yes. Because I don't want to do too many votes. We're not going to take up too much time with this.
So you have 3 choices, right?
Okay, here we go.
Okay, so just raise your hand once. Okay, that's how it works. You get to vote once. So if you think the first wine is Ariana's, please raise your hand. Nobody?
Okay.
Okay. If you think it's Chiara Boschi's, raise your hand. Oh my God, this is good. These kids are good.
Okay, hold on. Let me ask. Who thinks this wine is Elisabetta's?
Okay, great. Easy peasy.
All right, well, now we've made it really easy for you. So wine number 2, do we think it's Chiara's? Do we think it's Ariana's? Yeah, okay. And wine number 3, of course, is Chiara Boschi's. Let me tell you what we have. In glass number 1, I'll read it as we like. 2015 Vigneti della Dolomiti Nocciola Fontana Santa. And then wine number 2 from Okipinti, 2019 Frappato Vini di Contrada BB. And finally, wine number 3, 2010 Barolo Canubi. So I think 3 beautiful wines to start. We've had some tasting notes, but I think, as we said, we've got some younger, we have a young wine, the 2019, in between the 2015, going back to the 2010. So wonderful expressions and also some good evolution to some of these wines. Thank you all. We're now going to talk a little bit. We had a question for this trio. Each of these producers, each of you, represent very specific and highly individual wine territories, Sicily, Trentino, Barolo. And one of the things that I see a lot and that we're seeing is greater granularity in the wine industry, as winemakers see a wonderful terroir and they want to highlight it and bottle it separately. So what are the pros and cons of this? Of course, as a wine lover, to get more information and more expression, this is exciting. But also as a wine lover, to try and track down this very hard to find limited bottling is also difficult. And it means that the wine may not be part of a broader conversation. Can each of you talk a little bit about that while telling us about your wine and why you selected it? And maybe we'll just start at the far left with Ariana, if we may.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. and to be after 2 years, very strange for everybody. Today we are putting Frappato. Frappato is the grape original from Vittoria, where I live, where I was born. No, where I grew up. I was born in Marsala, so in the west coast of Sicily. Frappato is part of our appellation, that is Cerasuolo di Vittoria. Usually was blended with Nero d'Avola. And when I started making wine, I was attracted from this grape, and we took hands, because maybe Frappato needed a person that was believing in this amazing grape, and maybe I needed a very important grape to grow as winemaker, to grow as vineyard. So thanks to the character of this grape, I learned to make wine. And after years that I vinified the Frappato, blending some different parcel, and also vinifying the Nero d'Avola, that's so as you know, is one of the most important grape in Sicily, and I hope in the next future Nero d'Avola will get again the importance that this grape has. But Frappato, after 2016, I decided to start to vinify it parcel by parcel, so as a single vineyard, because for almost 15 years I was working and vinifying different kind of soil, and Vittoria is specialized as a lot of limestone. So we are at the feet of Iblei Mountains in the southeast of Sicily, in a very important place, because it's the unique DOCG. So Cerasuolo di Vittoria is the blend of Frappato and Nero d'Avola, is the unique DOCG of Sicily. And the area is made by different kind of limestone. So in Vittoria we have red sand usually on top for the first 30 centimeters, and compact limestone or tufa, or more like limestone underneath. When I started making wine, when I was driving tractor around the Vittoria place, I discovered the different parcel, and at the beginning I wasn't able to buy, so I rented this small parcel, and step by step I was able to buy. So now, fortunately, I have like a treasure, because I'm working in 9 different districts in Vittoria, so I vinified many different parts of this place, and I found the work parcel by parcel, one of the goal of a wine producer. It's not a tradition in Vittoria, but I started to make it because for me it's important to show what Vittoria is in the real part of his wine sense. So BB is the place where now I have the cellar, and this one is 19. And I have other 2 parcels, so PT, Contrada Pettineo, FL, Contrada Fossa di Lupo, and BB, Contrada Bombolieri. I decided to join with you Bombolieri because it's 100% limestone, as to show how Vittoria is able to make so fresh wine, even we are in the north of Africa, we can say at the end, no? So the perfect deep south of Sicily. Fortunately in Vittoria we have wine with low pH, high acidity, so I hope you join this freshness and elegance of the wine, and I invite you to discover the other parcel and contrada of Vittoria and come to visit us soon.
Thank you, Ariana. And maybe Elisabetta, if you would like to say a few words.
I'm also very pleased to be here. Thank you very much for everybody.
Are you still making wine?
I'm still making wine, yes. You see a cow, but Oh, my son is making wine now, but
Because I went to see her, yeah, and your son said, no, my mom's only making cheese now. No wine,
It's
no
another
more wine.
fermentation.
Yeah, but you know, it's more wheat cheese on wine, so this is good.
It's much more difficult to make cheese than wine. So far, I am now. Yes, tasting the wine from Ariana and feeling this freshness, and go back perhaps to Nosiola or Teroldego, which we are doing in the South Tyrol, so South Austria. You are in North Africa and we are in South Austria.
Apparently, we're not in Italy, we're in Africa, we're in Austria, okay.
So perfect. I was thinking about the beauty and the richness that this country has in terms of variety and expression of terroir, because at least we are, our mission, I think, as women, or generally say that people who are making wine, is really to transfer into a bottle this pure message of the different terroir, which is a word which is not our, I would say, genius loci, or something with, of course, include the climate, include the soil, the genetic, but include also what we are able to do with this. And what we are able to do sometimes, I mean, we are, as far the people who make possible this, and we are a great responsibility, because first, to save and improve the genetic of all this variety, which are a lot, but less and less, I mean, the variability is, sorry, I took a little bit generally, but, you know, Nosiola, Teroldego, probably you know, but, and second, how can we let express this terroir? Because if you don't put the plant in a condition of be healthy, be connected, you know, with the roots, with all what the soil has to say, and also with the leaves. So there are a lot of information coming also from the cosmos, also from outside, in a pure way. You won't be able to like express a terroir. So we have this great responsibility to that in a pure way, because viticulture at least is a monocultura. It's not naturally. We have the forest, which is naturally, but so these poor vine are constricted to be, yes, to work very close together. And as my experience in this 30 year was, let the plant live in community and let express the diversity. Then you can have terroir wine. And for us in the cellar, be respectful, be beside, a lot of thinking, but mostly a lot of instinct to be beside to this meraviglioso world of diversity that we can have. And I choose Nosiola because, of course, Teroldego has a lot of, I mean, we are more, probably people know Foradori more for Teroldego, but because it's a very shine, but very important variety for Trentino, which nobody knows. There are only 50 hectares, but it's like an example for the great Italian wine, which can age a lot, but only if you work with the skin, if you work with a certain cautions about, so that a lot of Italian white variety can now express herself through a different viticulture and different winemaking, because even Trebbiano, you know, if you press, you put in the bottle, it's a very boring wine, but a Trebbiano who can express himself through the skin is completely different. So that's because Nosiola is here, and yes, I'm very, very pleased to be with this great group of women. Thank you.
Thank you, Elisabetta. And Chiara.
Okay, also I'm very, very happy to be here. And to be honest, when I get this invitation for the iconic women, I said, what do I have of iconic in my life? I work like a donkey, I was doing the vineyard and in the cellar. But then I said, yes, I have this. This is the iconic thing, this vineyard, Cannubi, that has been given to me, that I take care of, and is really an iconic vineyard, an iconic place. When you think about the Langhe, the Barolo area, you think to terroir, of course, so the diversity of our vineyard, our plot is incredible. We really can make different wine from meter to meter. And that's why many years ago when I started this adventure as a winemaker, as a young winemaker, and I get the fortune to get together with some other friends. They were all boys, they were the Barolo boys, and I was the only girl in this group, but we understood that to underline and to put a spotlight on this characteristic, that would have been a very strong point for us. Barolo in the past has always been interpreted as a wine of assemblage. So all the different vineyards, the different expression of the various hills were put together. The idea was smart, of course, because you have a homogeneous and fantastic wine that put together all the different soul of our area. But to vinify in purity the single vineyard give the opportunity to understand much better, for us in premise, to understand much better the potential of our terroir. So Cannubi, the wine that I present today, it's a wine of incredible uniqueness. The fact that also the UNESCO gave us as the first wine region in the world the recognition for the as a patrimony of the humanity is important. The recognition not only to the quality but also to the beauty of our area, a beauty that has been sculptured by hard work of human beings. We have a lot of work in the vineyard because to make it look so beautiful and to taste so good, I promise you there is a lot of work that we do in person in the vineyard. Anyway, this wine is, so it's coming from this vineyard that is in the heart of the Barolo area, so it's really very well protected. It's almost like in a cup, so well protected by the weather, by all the other vineyard, and this particular is not too high in the altitude, around 300 meters over the level of the sea. We have this unique soil that is very rich in sand, so has a lot of drainage, so doesn't matter what, how is the weather, the condition, this vineyard performs always to his best. This vintage is 2010, that is important for me, so it shows the age, and sorry, the wine is not filtered. In fact, you will find a little bit of sediment. For me, it's important, Cannubi, because yes, it's true. Like Monica was saying, I had a dream because I am organic in the farming and of course in the winemaking, but I hope I could convince my neighbor and my colleague and friend of the Hill of Cannubi to create the first organic district in the area. At the beginning, everybody was saying, okay, this is the typical Mission Impossible. And could seem so, but to be honest, I tell you, now is really almost all done. So almost all the producers accepted to adopt the organic protocols for the Cannubi, which make me very, very happy and proud. The vintage 2010 is important for me because in this year, my brother Giorgio joined me. He has 3 wonderful daughters. They are all studying enology, of course, and they will be ready soon to take the torch and help in the cellar and in the vineyard. And there will be a new generation of women. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chiara. All right, so that was our first group, but let me, I think all three of you talked a little bit about this idea of expression of granularity. Can we get back to this, in terms of, we looked at some very little known grape varieties, and even all three of these, with Nebbiolo being much better known, are native Italian varieties from very sometimes smaller regions, lesser known. how, all of you producers, I think, how are you part of the broader conversation when you're trying to communicate about something that's very precise and very small sometimes? Is there anyone who would like to talk about this?
As I was telling you before, for example, for Barolo, I can tell you about this. My experience was always interpreted as an assemblage, and to be honest, the assemblage is a fantastic way to present the Barolo, because you get a little bit of all the perfume, the color, the taste of different vineyard that can impact in a big different way. But the single crew has this magic of showing you and teaching you about the character of that specific vineyard. I also do other two Barolo, like Monica was saying before. The other two Barolos are, one is another single crew in Monforte, Mosconi, and the third one is an assemblage. So I hope I invite you to taste, to come and taste this wine, because the vinification that I want to do is the same, in order to show the difference of terroir, because I think that really the terroir is our strength point to make people, engaging people to make fall in love with the area, and then according to the taste of everybody who likes more elegance, so for example prefer Canubi, who likes more the meat, the fruit, goes maybe, for example, in my case, to Mosconi. But it's really very nice, and it's possible to have much more fun if you have more diversity.
And I would say also, I mean, one of the beautiful things about Italian wine is the diversity. So this is just greater diversity. Yes. Anyone else, or shall we move on to our next group? Okay, I think we'll go to the next group, the next two wines, and we can all taste again really quickly. I haven't had a chance to taste yet.
I just wanted to say from over here that we are perfectly on time. So I wanted to say thank you to all the panelists and everyone. We are perfectly on schedule. And again, thank you for that.
By the way, if you have questions, there is a little card, piece of like a little index card. Okay, you can write your questions and then raise your hand, and we will collect them and if there's time, they will answer in the very end. Okay, so if you have any questions, please put your name and the question whom you are addressing, and then we will come and collect them.
So let's just briefly, while you're tasting the wines, talk about these two lovely wines. The interesting thing is that they're from the same vintage. I think we see a lot of energy and harmony from both of them. I don't want to give too much away. I think you all have your own tasting notes, but maybe Monica, you have a word or two to say?
Absolutely. First, I just want to say how beautifully everything is showing, especially in that last flight. It was absolutely fantastic. And now we go into this other flight. And here we get, in both wines, a more robust taste profile with darker fruits, a lot more earthiness, more volcanic nuances in one of the wines, and definitely a lot more intensity overall. So this is kind of a very special flight of these two wines, and they're both united not only by the fact that they share the same vintage, in this case, both warm vintage. It's a warm vintage, I can tell you that. But these are powerful, bold, muscular wines that really show a strong footprint.
Well, I mean, I would agree that they're powerful, they're bold, but I also think, again, that harmony and that sense of equilibrium that I was mentioning is there. And yes, you see these, it's like everything is amped up in the same level. There's a concentration of flavor, there's a concentration of structure, there's a concentration of acidity. And when you put the pieces all together, they all fit, making them really fascinating to taste today and showing very well. I guess I will do the reveal maybe. Yes. So, okay. So first of all, again, I'm going to give you a little clue. Who thinks that the first wine is an Amarone from Marilisa? Anyone? No. Okay. Who thinks the first wine is an Aglianico from Elena Fuchsia? Okay, bravo. And who thinks the second wine is an Amarone from Marilisa? Very good. You are all very good students. Okay. We have two 2012s. It's the 2012 Alianico del Votri Titolo from Elena Fuchsia and 2012 Amarone del Valpolicella Classico Riserva Fioramonte from Allegrini. Monica, do you want to lead here?
Yes, so I'm happy that everybody got a chance to taste those two wines. We now get to speak with the winemakers, Elena, dear Elena, and Marilisa. You both share amazing stories of bringing your regions to the forefront of Italian wine and communicating them. You faced special challenges in trying to explain Basilicata and Valpolicella respectively. What are some of the key points to stress when you travel abroad? And what has been your experience promoting wines from lesser known regions? How about we start with Marilisa, please?
So, thank you very much, Monica, for this question. And I think that we have to go a little bit back because it's 40 years that I'm traveling the world promoting Valpolicella wines. And I remember at the beginning of my traveling, Valpolicella was not an area that was really appreciated because Valpolicella was, at the beginning of the 80s, was known for inexpensive wine and the Valpolicella. And then Amarone was a very niche wine. And so not many high-end consumer really appreciate Valpolicella. So for me, it was a big challenge. And I travel a lot and I start in the United States where I learn a lot because I learned that it's important to make good wines, but it's also important to be able to communicate. And I remember the first time I went to America, my importer at that time didn't allow me to go out to sell wine until I wrote down everything about the company, about the wine production of the Valpolicella area, about the grape variety, about the different vinification process. So it was a big challenge. And at the beginning, I remember that sometime in some restaurant, when I was very proud to show my wine, some people said, "Oh, we don't want to have a Valpolicella wine in our wine list." And you can imagine that I was very, very sad about this. And so the storytelling was for me what helped me to promote the wine. So to put the wine, the vinification process, and also the diversity that Italy has, including the appassimento process, that is one of the characteristics of the Valpolicella, really helped me to make this area known. Because even among the high-end consumer, Valpolicella and especially Amarone was not a very well-known wine. And I realized that the Valpolicella became successful when in 2001, one of the wine that I produced was in the panel of the 10 top wines from Italy, and it was during the wine experience. And I think that 4 women that are here tonight, they were in the same panel. So talking about Amarone, this is Fioramonte, is a single vineyard Amarone that comes from a vineyard that is located at 450 meters, so quite high in Valpolicella. And Chiara explained about very well about the microclimate. And this vineyard combine good soil, great ventilation, and also fantastic exposure. And the vineyard is facing east, So my father always used to say that the vineyard that face east are the ones that have the most beneficial influence because they have the morning sun, so the temperature raise quite slowly, and so you have a good ripeness of the grapes. It was one of the first single vineyard that we produce. So we produced this wine from 1960 until 1985, and then we stopped producing the single vineyard because the vines were affected by the Esca disease. So at one point we took away all the vines, and then we let the soil to rest for 10 years, and then we replanted, and then we wait 10 more years until the vines develop the roots. And the wine is harvested. This is the 2012 vintage. It was harvested at the beginning of October, and then we dry the grapes and we press the grapes in the middle of January. Middle of January, we are in the coldest month of the year, so it takes 10-15 days the fermentation to start, and then the fermentation lasts for 2 months. When the wine is at 2/3 of the fermentation, we inoculate selected yeast because of the richness of the wine, it is very difficult to develop the last part of the sugar fermentation. So for the skin contact lasts for almost 2 months. And then we immediately, after the fermentation, when we separate the skin from the juice, we put the wine into barrels. And then we have the evolution of this intense, rich wine in barrel for 48 months. And one of the characteristics of the wine is this intensity, but also we never lose the focus on freshness. And in fact, we don't let the wine to have the malolactic fermentation, so the wine can keep this freshness. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marilisa. Thank you very much. So I would pose the same question to Elena, but Elena, specifically for you, I would like to know what lessons can you offer to a young generation of female winemakers when it comes to communicating your territory? You have had such a special role specifically in this part.
Mm-hmm. Ciao Monica. Ciao.
Ciao Elena. Ciao.
Ciao. Thank you, Stevie. Thank you, Alison, and you, Monica, for this experience. For me, it's fantastic to be here with this special woman wine. For me, it's a dream. Okay, thank you so much. And my dreams in the world wine start in 2000, 22 years ago. And because my family think to sold the vigna, my old vigna in Basilicata on the Monte Vulture. The Monte Vulture is an old volcano extinct, you know. And my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather had these vines, but they don't making a wine. They sold the grapes for the producer or consortium. My mom and my dad in his life are a teacher. And in 2000, my family think to sold these vines. In the summer 2000, I finished the high school, and I think to study engineering genetics. But in September, I changing idea because I know my family with the vines sold my house, the house where I born, and when I living with all my family, and I changing my life. I decided to study viticulture and enology, agronomy, and I start to making a wine.
when I started in 2000, the people in the world, they don't know where is Basilicata, where is Vulture, what is Aglianico del Vulture. And the first time when I started to making a wine, I think, okay, I have 6 hectares all together around the cellar, a single vineyard, a single grape, Aglianico del Vulture. I decide to produce and to make a single wine, a single label. And born my wine, my life, titolo. And my experience in the world is the same, Marilisa, because I travel a lot in my life. I travel a lot for explain, for to know for the other people in the world my region and my wine. And usually, when I describe my wine in the modern, but not modernist wine, because it's my idea of Aglianico del Vulture, but is my idea of Aglianico del Vulture because I'm winemaker of my wine, and but I work and respect the variety and the terroir where we are. The principal characteristic of Aglianico are 3: acidity, minerality, and tannin. Usually when the people think of Sud Italy, or when the people think a red wine in Sud Italy, they think a very hot weather, very strong red wine. But for the Vulture, this is not true, because we are in the middle, we are on the mountain. The Vulture is like 1,300 meters, and we are 600 meters on top, the Monte Vulture. We have every winter a snow, and the summer and spring are very fresh with high excursion night and day. And in the first time, the people 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the people in the world, they don't know this, because they usually think, okay, Sud Italy is very hot weather, very strong red wine, but for the Aglianico, we work for the high acidity, minerality. This is the typically characteristic of the Aglianico. Here in the glass, you have 2012, the vintage, and for me is funny because is 10 years ago, and 10 years ago I don't imagine this in the wine world. 10 years ago, I don't know my life changing complete in these 10 years. And for me, it's a pleasure and honor to say here. And sorry for my English, because I start to work very young, and I start to study English 4 years ago. And for me, this is crazy to speak. How are you? And thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you, Marilisa. I mean, I just have to say, it's a real pleasure to do this comparison of the same vintage, and we're talking north and south, so a common theme. And I love, as Monica mentioned, the freshness to this, but I also, it's so interesting to see how your wine has aged, Elena, and also for you, Marilisa, to see the evolution as well. So thank you both. We are going to move on to our third flight, and we have 2 last wines. I won't have to give you a hint as to who the 2 producers are, process of elimination. You know, the interesting thing here is obviously we're talking Tuscany, and there's this beam of black cherry and black currant fruit in our first wine, as well as these fine but structured tannins and kind of a loamy earth character underneath. And then we see that same pure fruit in our second wine, but also a savory component that comes along with the dark berries and the fig. There's some olive and there's some iron. Any comments, Monica, from you?
Yes, I mean, we are talking about 2 wines from 2 vintages that are 5 years apart, both relatively cool vintages, if you'd like. maybe one with moments of heat at different times. But it's also a different palette when it comes to grape varietal, that we'll discuss that. But these are two very important wines that come from a shared DNA, if you will, because the two families that made them are in fact cousins. So, I mean, there's a shared winemaking knowledge and know-how and expertise that is definitely broadcast across both glasses. These are beautiful wines. Every wine in this flight has been just amazing. And I've been so impressed to see all of the little differences from, the tip south, the deep south of Italy to the far north. And now we kind of go into this, a softer zone of central Italy. And you can definitely taste the sunshine and the Toscanità, the Tuscan influences in both these glasses for sure.
The under the Tuscan sun, I think.
Yes, definitely.
Great. So let's see, who thinks our first one is Antinori? Okay, and who thinks our first wine is from Priscilla, San Guido?
Well,
Okay.
a lot of you didn't vote.
Well, and who thinks that we're tasting something else completely?
Let's do it again.
Okay, who thinks the first wine is from Antinori? Okay, more hands. Who thinks the second wine is from,
Second wine is from Antinori.
and who thinks the second wine is from Antinori? We'll do it this way. Very few, okay. Anyhow, the voting process is over. The first one is the 2018 Tignanello, and the second wine is the 2013 Sassicaia. So to let our producers speak, so Albira, Priscilla, the two of you carried the honor, the responsibility of an important family wine legacy. And you have kind of a unique perspective that allows us to assess both the past of Italian wine, but also the future. So in general, I would love to talk a little bit about the direction of Italian wine, in your opinion. Specifically, Albira, maybe we'll start with you. Something, if you would mention, is, we've seen a lot of growth in Italian wine over the years, and there's been a lot of success even during COVID. And how does Italy keep its momentum? How do you keep it exciting and competitive? You're taking a big legacy and you're moving forward with it in a very positive way. What kind of advice can you give to people in the wine industry?
So thank you, Alison and Monica from remote. I think everybody's getting talking about the wine, so we'll just be very brief and concise. Compliments for all the wines that have been tasted until now. I think here we have an example. If we talk about the direction of where Italian wines are, we have an example of, with the last two wines, of the history of the past 50 years, where it has come from, and of the diversity and uniqueness of the wines that can be made in Italy, which is exactly what the future of Italian wines can be. It's the terroir, the diversity, the uniqueness of the stories that we have here. There are not many other parts of the world that can have these assets. We have unique and special varieties. Terroir still to be discovered. There are so many. I mean, we see how we know we know Italian wines, but still every day you get surprised by wonderful areas with local varieties, even with foreign varieties planted, that makes wine that really you put your nose in and you say, it's Italy. And it's some parts I don't know, but they've got this elegance, they've got this minerality, they've got the sun inside, that really, what can you ask more for future? We've got a long past, which is not long because it's only 50 years, 50, 60, which wines that have, there are other regions that have a longer history, but let's say the recognability of Italian wines from other areas, other countries have come in the past 50 years. And if you think lots of areas, lots of appellation, even a traditional one, we've had vineyards that perhaps have been replanted once or twice, 30 years more or less. So there's going to be lots of new things coming up. The important is that we have a vision that is centered in the quality with the idea of pulling out uniqueness, personality, and distinctive stories that are linked to what there is also behind, because wine is not only what is in the bottle, but is also whatever we manage to explain and take around.
Great. Thank you, Albira.
So talking about the wine, because I think everybody pretty much knows what Tignanello is, but it's 80% Sangiovese, 20% Cabernet Sauvignon and Cabernet Franc. It grows into our estate of Tignanello, which is between Florence and Siena, in center of Chianti Classico. The first vintage was 1971, and it was a bit of a turning point, at least in our winery. To give us also the courage to show what Italian wines can be. And a very close story to the one of Priscilla, as Monica said, it's family DNA, and there it goes.
Okay, great. All right, we're going to hear from our last producer, Priscilla. A specific question for you. Italian wine has always been, very often linked to families and multiple generations of the same family making it. How can Italian wine families safeguard against the pressures of outside investors, banks, venture capitalists, an increasingly competitive market? How can Italy keep its magic?
Thank you. Thank you, Alison. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for including me in this panel. Like Monica said in the introduction, I am part of a family, I'm part of a team. And when they asked me to be one of the 7 iconic women, I wasn't very sure that I would really make part of this group, but I guess that I can represent an iconic wine. So I'm happy to be, no, come on. I'm happy to be here and discuss it together with you and tell you a bit about the story of our family and how we exactly deal with these things that Alison outlined in her question. It's not easy because all the issues that she mentions are actually a real issue for the family businesses. And you need to have a very strong sense of pride for the family enterprise, for the family project, really strong sense for the family values. And we have this great responsibility to carry forward for the next generations what we have received from our predecessors. And the idea is to do this the idea is to pass on something that we got in a better shape than how we received it. So we're kind of seeing ourselves as the guardians of something that we have to take care of for the ones that are coming after us. And of course, these broader family values also have to be combined with a certain financial project behind it, because financial goals have to support the family goals. Having a long-term view, we are maybe not interested in making short-term cash, but nonetheless, of course, we need to have a sustainable virtuous circle around what we are doing. I guess that trying to involve the family members in some way in the family activities is a good idea to keep everybody interested. We are quite lucky in our case because, as you might know, Tenuta San Guido is not just about wine. We have a large estate where we do several activities. So we have a possibility of involving different family members in different aspects. We have horses, we have a nature reserve. So in my generation, for example, we are 5 cousins, first cousins, 4 boys and myself. And some of them are more interested in wine, others are more interested in nature and horses, and others are just happy to make part of this group. And all together, we try to do our best to carry forward this great legacy. Of course, it's very important that we also, in case of need, one shouldn't be ashamed to say that one can get some nice advice. There are some companies who do exactly that, especially in generation transition. You can get some consultancy on how to deal with this family generation change issues. And very important also for Tenuta San Guido is to make part of this group of producers called the Primum Familie Vini, the PFV, which is all about this kind of problems, and being able to share our issues and our know-how and our problems with others that have similar situations. It's very, very comforting and also very interesting for us. So this is, it's very important. Thank you. So just 2 words about Sassicaia that we're serving today. It's the 2013 vintage. We chose this vintage because we wanted to show a little bit of age, Sassicaia with a bit of evolution. We chose the Magnum format because it's the way how the wine can be aging at its best. It's a vintage that was very good and regular in the Bolgheri area, but maybe a bit less talked about because it came in between 2 quite challenging vintages for completely different reasons. 2012 was very warm, 2014 was very cold and rainy, and 2013 was a little bit stuck in between. So maybe it's a vintage that was not very much talked about, but we thought it would be nice to share it with you today. And we think for us, it's very much representing our style of production. So we're happy to share it with you today. Thank you.
Thank you. Prashil's conversation made me think we're talking about the financial legacy and future for these wineries, but also let's talk for a moment about sustainability. You said giving to the next generation, and I think this is something that all of us in the wine industry hear a lot about. So I would really open it up to all of our producers, all of our panelists here, to mention if there's something special they would like to say in their winery that they're focusing on, how you're facing climate change. We have wineries from north to south in Italy, and we know that it's a difficulty everywhere. So please, sustainability is the topic. Albira, I see, maybe?
I think the word sustainability is a complicated word to use.
This is why I left it very open.
In the sense that to somebody it can mean biodynamical, biological. For what I see, in the perspective I see, it is a puzzle made of many things, obviously with the final objective of leaving something better to the next generation. And this goes not only in the field, also in the winery, but also across the workers, across the sales, across lots of parameters. And that I wish that we should have in Italy one certification that says sustainable, because if not, it becomes really difficult to set a space and go along. I literally admire for who manages to do biological or biodynamical. In some area it is difficult, so some wineries should have the option of compensate with other things in order to have something at the end that is really on 100% sustainable. Not only, as Priscilla said, it has to be economically also sustainable.
Great. And Elena?
Alison, I try, okay, because I try. And for me, we work in biologic in outside, inside, in cellar. And our new cellar is all in bioarchitecture. It's the first cellar in Basilicata, is the first cellar in Basilicata. We use all the recycled material for the construction. We recycle the raining water. We are energetics impact zero because every energy we consume, we produce, and the solar panel help us in this, but the building is energetics impact zero. Is a cantina clima. Do you know Casa Clima in Italy? And for me, this is the first step for the new generation, for the new, this is my work, and we are biologic and we are eco-sustainable before for us, because we live and we work with the whole family in Vigna and in our town, and after for all you and for all world. And for me, this is the first step, because I'm very small, very small seller, and this is my contributor for the new generation.
Alison.
And Elisabetta?
Yes. Yeah, this is a very, very complex item. But the first thing I think we as farmer, because we are farmer, we are also viticultori, but we are farmer. We are responsible for the fertility of the soil, which is our richness, not only for making wine, it's for making what we have to eat. And this is not very difficult to do. I mean, further my experience in the last 30 years, working, everybody choose with way, but to be self-producer of the fertility for your soil, which is the main item for the biodynamic method, is a very important thing, because the human being forget how important is agriculture. And perhaps in these days, which are very dramatic, which the cost of the fertilizing is, I don't know how much is going up. Everybody say, oh, what's going on? We will die because we don't have enough wheat, but this is a perverse cycle of the human being who push in one direction, but in fact is responsible for this, for the next generation. And this is, for us, the first step, because we choose to do in another way. And I say it's really not difficult. It's just to see things with other perspective, and to be farmer who are creative and responsible for the future of the soil. And then whatever is grape, is wheat, is yes, but I know it's a complex item, so it was just my contribution on that. Thank you.
I mean, I think that as these answers show, when you talk about sustainability, it goes everywhere from developing more biological material in your soil all the way to the solar panels on top of the winery and shipping your wine. So there's so many different layers to it. But, this idea of doing more for the future, the next generation, is, I think, an important one to everybody who's here on this panel. Before we open questions to the audience, Monica, do you have anything you want to ask or any other comments?
I do. I definitely want to get 2 questions from the audience. But before I do, I have a question that kind of throws the responsibility back on us as wine journalists, Alison and I. We work with giving points to wines. We think about a lot of these wines in a numerical sense, which can be limiting, but it's also very effective, and it communicates the quality of a wine. And I wanted to open up to the panel this question. now that we're going through what we've been through with COVID and the world is changing, I think we all agree that storytelling or telling the whole story behind a wine is becoming increasingly important. How can we improve that? How can the producers communicate differently their wines? And how can journalists also get some of the story across? It seems that as we go forward, this is the real way to help Italian wine be more competitive, is to have the down to the soil, down to the producer, down to the winery, down to the vineyard, down to the last rock story told behind the wines. I'm just wondering if there's any thoughts on that. And then I think we should definitely take questions from the audience. Thank you.
I would like to add something about the sustainability. And I think that in the three wineries that I own, Allegrini, Poggio Tesoro, and Sapolo, in all the winery, we achieved the sustainable certification. But this is something that is difficult to communicate to consumers, because in terms of institution, we don't have the strength and we don't have the possibility. I know that organic is recognized, but the sustainable certification is something that is going on. And I think that we have to develop more sensitivity on the consumer about this thing. And definitely sustainable organic is a trend that will definitely go on, because we want to respect the environment is our main task, and we also want to respect the people that work in the vineyard. So we changed completely our approach to the viticulture in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we're going to get to Monica's question. I could just reply to that, at Wine Spectator, we have talked many times over many years about wanting to write about sustainability, about organic, about biodynamic. But as you said, it's just there's no clear definition. It becomes very hard to write about it in a way that consumers will understand. So it's a real challenge. And I agree there needs to be more regulations that cross borders also, because in the United States versus Europe, there's different categories and different certifications. Chiara, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I was saying, doesn't matter the certification or the law, whatever. I'm worried that we are almost too late. The change of the environment, the change of the weather is here to stay. So I don't know if we are still on time, but we have to move, to act. Don't even talk about, just everybody has to do their own part. I think we all do at this table, I know we all do organic, biodynamic, who cares? What is important is we do respect our environment, we behave well, and it's important that normal people do it. We cannot expect the big boss of the world would care about that. They are taking us into a war, they are taking us into the disaster. So I think we have to we have to move now, I think.
Yes, definitely. Monica, do you want me to address your question to somebody specifically? You can be a teacher and call on them.
Basically, I just wanted to ask, how can we improve communication of wine, especially since we're dealing with iconic women? How do we tell the stories better? Maybe, yeah.
I mean, maybe to extrapolate, all of you are communicating about your wines right now and have done a great job, and this is why you're iconic women. What have been some of your challenges and successes, perhaps? And how should we help you with that storytelling?
No, I think that the way to communicate better is not just to speak about our production, but to speak about the
territory where we live and the value that we have. In Italy, we have beautiful arts, we have beautiful cities, we have beautiful monuments. We have cities that, like Verona, for example, it has a Roman, medieval, and Renaissance city. So we have to put the product, the agricultural product, and not just wine, in a cultural context. And this is, for me, is the future of the Italian wine production.
I might take it to the other end and Ariana, ask you to speak. You know, as I mentioned, I think that your name became well known, but I think you helped to talk about Frappato and talk about Vittoria and talk about Sicily in a larger context and not just your winery. So can you maybe talk a little bit about your early experiences communicating what you were doing?
My idea is to ask to Monica and you the same question. How we have to communicate the wine in our future, because after 2 years of COVID, I think every change for me, for example, I'm in a moment of a lot of thoughts about this. I'm trying to have a break from some events because I need to reflect, and I think we have to come back to the truth, the real part of our life. In the whole world, a lot was and is done. We talk about everything. Now is the moment of sustainability, so we are talking about this. And in a side, I'm very happy because everybody is trying to do the best they can in their farm. So it's very good. I'm also part of a new group in Sicily that is called Sustain. It's a foundation. We are trying, because sustainability is a personal journey, but it's also something that we have to do in group. So in this moment of my life, I'm trying to help also other producers in Sicily to transform their idea to make wine and to manage their farm. Also in cooperative, because if we change 2,000 vineyards in a cooperative, we are changing a lot of hectares of vineyards, no? So I'm trying to work in this, but I have no idea what is the future of the wine now about communication. I think we have to do what we feel. I feel myself more in the production, so I will be in the place where I be comfortable with myself. And the most important thing is to concentrate our work in our place, to work really in the agriculture that we choose to have, and trying to bring our method to other people and to transform step by step, because it's not very easy. It's easy. It's really easy to make a sustainable agriculture, but I hope that it's not very fast inside, because it's a personal journey. So we must do, because everybody is making, but I think the real change will be when everybody start to feel every day in their life, in their choice, even when we buy from the supermarket, even when we do every action in our life, this is the real change. So the communication of the wine world is a difficult thing for me at the moment. So maybe you will help us to find an answer better.
I mean, I think that it's important, as you said, you're taking a moment to sit back and pause and think on it. And I think that we all, in whatever work you're doing, you need to always take time to periodically check in and see what the next steps are, what the new direction is. And this is how we all really move forward, and even your personal life. So I wanted to see, do we have any questions from the audience on the cards?
Let me kick it off. I'll pretend I'm from the audience. So I'm going to say something very unpopular, as I always do. I think the communication of wine is something very dear to me. And I think, frankly, the communication that goes on Italian wine especially is the fault of Tanori family. Because they have such a wonderful, beautiful 26th generation of story to recount, and everybody wants to be like Tanori. That's what I face as an agency, right? When I'm doing agency work, I want my homepage to be like Tanori's.
But
okay.
Hold on, I must say, I really appreciate, Albira, that you did the first generation and work us all the way through all 26. You were on topic and concise about telling your history.
So yes, you're the good cop. So the point is, I think we have to, all of the wineries have to find an original story, right? Because we throw the word sustainability in a very, very casual way, right? And as Albira had mentioned, it has to be also economically sustainable. That is an issue that we don't really address because we like the romantic story of the generation and the terroir and everybody. If you took an advertising page, even in Spectator or Advocate, you take a page and all the families in their barrels and their cellar, and you cut out their face and replace it with anybody else, it will be exactly the same. So in terms of the communication, I think we are struggling because we have to find the uniqueness and original story of each winery. And I think that is something that we have to ask ourselves. I think you are all up here because you all have an original story to tell. And that's what I think everyone else has to do. And that's, I know I'm not very popular, but so I just had to get that off my chest. Questions for the real people? Yes. Anybody? We have, I think, Cynthia with the mic. Yes.
Albira wants to say something.
Yes, hi, Albira.
Yes, I mean, this is getting personal, exactly. So I haven't really understood what you meant by it's all Antinori's fault. But saying this, I think here the point is we need to get our wines always better and better. And journalists need to find the stories and tell them the better it is. So let's not mix them too much, the two.
Yeah, actually, the owner of Wine Spectator always says that he wants to hire fresh journalists because you can teach people about wine, but to find the story is a lot harder. So
I agree.
This is the important thing. But, I will also say, I think Marilisa made a very good point. In terms of talking to foreign markets, you need to also consider that people don't always understand where you're talking about. I mean, to most Americans, Italy is Florence, Rome, and Venice, and maybe they've heard of Milan, So you have to start somewhere and equate it and make it understandable. And I think that all of these women do that while telling their own personal stories and their own original story. If we don't have any questions, do we have questions from the audience? I do have one kind of wine geeky question, if we can dive in a little bit. We have a number of people here who have officially made wine. Oh, okay, sorry. Kathy, you have a question? Oh, sorry? No. Yes, yeah, go for it.
Sorry, I feel like the bigger question where you were going is far more interesting. But I wrote a question down. It's actually for Chiara about the single crew. When you were talking about the single crew, what has it taught you to do the single crew that will inform how you work with the assemblage with your other wines?
Yes, I was telling you the story. This is a nice story of the Barolo boys, So what's happened is that many years ago, at the end of the 80s, we were a bunch of young winemakers, and we were trying to taste as much wine as we could. And because we were all small winemakers, we were doing, of course, the vinification in punctually. So we were comparing the wine from Barolo, Canubi, the Barolo from other villages, Monforte, Castiglionfiletto, Lamorra, and so on. And we were really astonished by this diversity, that if you stay in your own little village, you don't make it, you don't make this experience. So only with this help of this group, and actually that was a very revolutionary thing, because in the past, people has always walk alone. So for the first time, we get together and we kind of, we made this revolution first inside, mentally speaking. That was the idea was to help each other, to learn more and to grow. And these things that come up into our eyes was the uniqueness and the incredible beauty of this diversity. So for us was immediately clear the direction to go. We started to do this fanatic choice of vinification in purity, and we went on and on. In fact, finally in 2010, we also had the recognition of the MGA that before wasn't existing. So the regulation that finally decided the border of the single vineyard. But also on the other side, we started also to appreciate the assemblage, that was the traditional way of making the wine. So the idea is really to have more chance, more options. So like the ancient Romans said, varietas delectat. So.
I think we're actually really about out of time. So I want to just say, just to take a look at these wines and what we've tasted, as I said, from all over Italy, many different grape varieties and all beautiful expressions. What a wonderful tasting, what wonderful speakers. To all of the women, the ladies here, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a very special experience.
To my left, Elisabetta Foradori, Elena Fuchsia, Ariana Okipinti, and of course, Monica. Very good spirit, and Alison Napjus. And I want to thank First Ladies because, of course, they donated all of these wines so that we can have a conversation.
And our time.
Yes, absolutely.
In Italy.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Just from Sicily. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Stevie, for this.
Okay, you guys can go home. Okay. Thank you very much. Ciao ragazzi.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much for coming.
Feel better, Monica.
Feel better. Ciao, Monica. I'll ping you later to see if you're alive.